Hello, everybody. I'm here with my coffee as usual and with my very best friend, my greatest mentor and my greatest pupil, Dr. Douglas Gabriel, and with his insurmountable support group backing him up, the Princess Tyla Gabriel, or Queen Tyla. I shouldn't get that.
You better
wrong.
get that straight.
But here we are, and this is our fifth journey into exploring the spiritual scientific understanding of what is cosmic intelligence, and being it's the fifth episode, and we are in the fifth post-Atlantean period according to spiritual science, and being that the fifth mystery is the mystery of evil, we can't ignore that. But in that token, we shouldn't be intimidated by that, because as we all know, in the world of spiritual science, we understand that Rudolf Steiner said that Christ is infinitely more powerful than the adversaries. So all is well in terms of that. And the more that you can align yourself with the intentions of the divine spiritual powers, the better off you shall be. And so, without further ado, I welcome my fellow Detroiter, Dr. Douglas Gabriel. Hello, Douglas.
Hey, John, happy birthday.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Wow. Yes, as I was quoting you earlier, the Bible indicates that the age of human beings is 70, and beyond that is the grace of God. So as of tomorrow, you're on the grace of God. And it's due to some of your merit, some of the good work you've done. So I just hope that I can get to be that old someday. But that's really, really old, John. So congratulations. And thrilled today to be with you again talking about human and cosmic wisdom or truth or intelligence or consciousness, however you wish to frame it.
Well, I thought it would be a good idea, since today you had the bright idea to do this today. So I thought I'd let you lead the charge here and see if we could dip into some of the research that you've been able to extract from a couple of the lecture cycles. I like to take different lectures of Rudolf Steiner's that are perhaps somewhat challenging, and then see how they mesh, because that's where spiritual science really lives. It's not enough just to read a lecture. It's to be able to read that lecture many times, to make it a part of you, and then take another lecture that you've read many times, and then try and discern the way in which they meet. And it's that gap. That's where consciousness exists. Consciousness is that which exists in the gap between space and time, between before and behind, between the right and the left, and the above and below, and the inner and the outer. So we're trying to find that meeting point, because as Rudolf Steiner has indicated, that the universe is consciousness.
That's so true. And for many, many years, I tried to figure out what he was saying in terms of consciousness can be found in between the gap between blood and nerve. And so for many years, I studied that, trying to figure out the biochemistry of that, trying to figure out bioenergetics and cybernetics and all these things. And it's exactly as you say, it's in what he calls the cube that is in the heart, which has six sides, the above, the below, the left, right, forward, backward, and in the middle, we find our consciousness. And there's a thing called there's actually a square around the heart for different types of organs, the striatum, the forward, the backward, up, down, left, right, and in the middle is the heart. And so literally after all these years, through modern research, we showed that what Rudolf Steiner said was correct again and again. Now, speaking of birthdays, my favorite Steiner quote, which is a meditation for teachers that was given on August 21st, 1919, that's my birthday, August 21st. So it's another birthday gift. And of course, being an egotist like I am, I figured, the best meditation, of course, is going to be on August 21st. But we said this at the beginning of every College of Teachers meetings in the Waldorf schools. Some of us said it every morning before we taught our children, along with the calendar of the soul. I'd like to read it because it's so apropos to what we're talking about today. When you're talking about angels, archangels, and archai, people are, their eyes cloud over and they say, what are you talking about? You've met an angel? Well, yes. You can meet an angel in your thinking. You can meet an archangel in your feeling, and you can meet archai in your will, but not the lower forms of it, the higher form of thinking, feeling, and willing, imagination, inspiration, intuition. So I went to these lectures that you told me I should study before this, and pulled out some quotes today. I'm going to be reading from Steiner about angels, archangels, archai, and how they relate to the human being, some of which are a bit shocking, but are the way that it really is. And then next time, I think I'll go to some of the quotes that you had suggested, or some of the lectures you'd suggested, to try to understand how they manifest in these higher forms of thinking, feeling, and willing, which Rudolf Steiner calls imagination, inspiration, and intuition. So that is found here in this verse, and I thought we might start off with this, and then also the reference you just made to knowing that when we look forward, we're using the power of angels to look into the future, and that is, in fact, where the astral light, the astral desires, and the higher astral impulses exist, and in the past is where the etheric exists, and that's where the archangels reside. And in the middle, when those two forces come together, intuition can alight, and literally alight. And it comes as these forces from the future are coming at us, from the past are coming at us. And when we stand in that sacred space, as he called it in some cases a rock, solid as a rock, that cube, we can transform that cube, as we've spoken about before, into, instead of a 6-sided polyhedron, into a 12-sided platonic solid called the dodecahedron. And that is really what intuition is. It's this transformation of the physical into the spiritual. So this is from Towards the Deepening of Waldorf Education by Rudolf Steiner, introductory remarks to the opening of his lecture series called The Study of Man, the Study of Human Beings, which he gave in the Teachers Conference as one of his first trainings for the original Waldorf teachers in the Waldorf School in Stuttgart, Germany, on August 21st, 1919. And this is how it goes. We wish to form our thoughts in such a way that we may be conscious that behind each of us stands his angel, gently laying his hands on the head of each. This angel gives you the strength which you need. Above your heads there sweep the circling archangels. They carry from one to the other what each has to give to the other. They unite your souls. Thereby, you are given the courage of which you need to stand. Out of this courage, the archangels form a chalice. The light of wisdom is given to us by the exalted beings of the archai, who are not limited to the circling movements, but who, coming forth from primal beginnings, manifest themselves and disappear into primal distances. They reveal themselves only in the form of a drop of light. Into the chalice of courage there falls this drop of light, enlightening our times, bestowed by the ruling spirit of our age. And in this verse, you can see so many of the things that we've already made reference to. And this was one that is given so that we have the strength and the courage and the united effort of a group of people working so that the future does not overwhelm us and the past does not limit us, but that it comes directly into your heart in this drop of light into a chalice formed by the archangels. And of course, this chalice would be what we would consider to be a reference to the Holy Grail, which of course is found in the human heart. So I wanted to start off with that because I believe that it's kind of a summary of many of the things we may be making reference to in this talk today.
Yes, that's what I love about doing talks with you is we just manage to mesh our thinking and thematically are able to create this kind of a dialogue. And that comes with the fact of that, though our guests here are basically eavesdropping on a 50-year conversation or so, 45, 50-year conversation. And the central theme of that conversation has been for all those many years is that very self-same force of courage. And that's the armor of God that's referenced in Scripture. And it's this armor of God that gives us the stability to be able to stand amidst whatever life chooses to bring to us. And in reference to this, Rudolf Steiner, another extract, he says, and I quote, "We must eradicate from the soul all fear and terror of what comes toward man out of the future. We must look forward with absolute equanimity to everything that may come." And so that's what we're looking at. And that's in reference to Rudolf Steiner's presentation of world history, that courage force, that's that northern mystery. That's something that comes out of the cold north, and the Norse mythos, the cycles of the saga of Sig or Siegfried and Kalevala and the Prose Edda and the Elder Edda and all these accounts that really people would think that they had circulated for a long time amongst Europeans, but no, actually they were lost for so much of European history and then reclaimed from the ancient path in archaic language, and then had to be translated through the modern developments in language studies that occurred in the 1800s. And so coming out of that kind of a view, it gave an archetypal image of how we had resolved our relationship to the past. And as Douglas was pointing out, in the lecture cycles that we're referencing here, Rudolf Steiner makes the point of that the future is coming at us out of the astral and the realm of the angels. And that's the realm of Manas. That's the realm of the spirit self. And likewise, our reference to the past is coming out of the life body, the etheric body, the body of etheric formative forces. And elsewhere he makes reference to that the custodian in a particular sense of those mysteries of the etheric body and the mysteries of time is Moses, and that the custodian of the forces of space and that which comes to us out of the future is Hermes. So you have this Mosaic and Hermetic meeting in terms of consciousness that we dwell with it. And we're in the fifth post-Atlantean period. The turning point of time was in the fourth post-Atlantean period. We're in the fifth. So we're, in a sense, in a very important sense, recapitulating that Egypto-Chaldean period, that the events of the Old Testament and the events surrounding ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia are so developed in that period of the that arises out of the sentient soul. And so it's the sentient soul that's such an important element when you want to understand the Northern Mysteries, because in the Northern Mysteries, Rudolf Steiner said that because they didn't develop an intellectual, sophisticated worldview, that they were able to maintain their relationship to this pristine nature of the astral world. And it was a very living experience for the tribal culture of Northern Europe, including the Drotten mysteries and the mysteries of Odin, Wotan, and Balder, and also the Celtic mysteries in Ireland, and the mysteries all over the British Isles. And so in looking at this, you could see how he develops that the previous cultures of the Stone Age, ancient India, in the age of Cancer, and then the late Stone Age culture on the Iranian plateau of Zarathustra in the age of Gemini, and then coming up to the third post-Atlantean period, the Egypto-Chaldean period that we're now recapitulating, that was the period of the sentient soul. But see, the Northern culture, because it had not had contact with the developments that came about in these other cultural periods, that they remained as what Rudolf Steiner described as a waiting culture, that they had a relationship to that. They missed all the development of the intellectual soul and all of that. They maintained a relationship to the sentient soul and its clairvoyant capabilities, but that they were instructed musically by the great master Scithianos, and that planted a seed in them for future developments within the realms of mathematics and science, and also the high art of music as seen in Beethoven and Bach and Mozart and Chopin, and so many of these just highly sophisticated developments that are without precedent. But nonetheless, in this Northern European culture, because they didn't have these developmental stages worked into them from the preceding cultures, they were pristine in a way that it's presented as the twilight of the gods, that there was something that was coming to an end, that they were arriving at the end of their mission as a tribal culture. And it's depicted very strongly in the Northern mythology. And so you see this Götterdämmerung, the twilight of the gods, that it's coming to a conclusion. But you say, well, what is it coming a conclusion toward? And then you look and see that it was that they were unencumbered with the developments of previous cultures, so that they had a completely fresh relationship to the mystery of Golgotha and the relationship to the mysteries of Christ, and that they were the custodians of the Apollonian stream, of the sun mystery stream of the North, that it was delivered every year to Greece, but that it was that Hyperborean impulse, the people of the frozen North. And so that when they were brought to the Christ mysteries, they realized that that was a fulfillment of what they were seeking in their own mysteries. And so it's extremely profound when you get into an understanding of how the past moves toward and the future is coming at you out of the astral, and that whole mystery of our relationship to the realm of the angels and the archangels.
Well, you know that when you start talking about the Scythians, I get really terribly excited, because it's one of those mysteries that has yet to be fully fathomed. Robert Seffer has done probably one of the better renditions of who the Scythians are and their influence, all the way from what you have mentioned, Atlantis, across Ireland and Iceland and Western Europe, all the way to the far distant parts of Eastern Europe and across the Bering Straits into America. And then they returned and they came all the way back to Ireland. And on the way, both going and coming, Scythionus was the great initiate who Rudolf Steiner said was one of the greatest initiates, the initiate who understood the nature of the human body. All along the way, he took what was there with the Aboriginal people that were there, and he took their language and transformed it. He took what they believed and turned it into more of a codified system, so that, as you said, in the Prose Edda, the Poetic Edda in Iceland, and then the Norse mythology in Northern Europe. In Finland, when it had returned all the way from the East, having been inculcated by the influences of the great Manu, because Scythianus at the beginning of his travels was with Manu. Manu went to Central Asia, and Scythianus, over many incarnations, went all the way to Central Asia and even further, as I've said, and came back with the impulses that then became what we know as Finland, because those are the same languages used by the northern cultures in Siberia and the shamanistic cultures. Those languages are the same used in Finland. And Rudolf Steiner said, and as you pointed out, we are in the third stage of the soul development called the consciousness soul. And in that age, he told us that there are a few things we can study to help us through that. The primary thing is to study the Kalevala, which is basically like a fairy tale of three beings: Wainamoinen, who created all things and sang it into existence; Ilmarinen, who was the smithy or the forgeman, the forger, who was able to forge this magical mill called the Sampo, which again has tremendous mysteries in it, wonderful to study; and then this upstart youth, Lemminkainen. Those are, of course, the three soul forces in the human being: the sentient soul, intellectual soul, and consciousness soul, as you've made reference to. So if you study the Kalevala, of course, by the way, Wainamoinen, the one who sung everything into existence, had a mother called Ilmatar. As in all great traditional religions, there's always a female impulse at the beginning that was seemingly there from the beginning. And so you can see the three soul forces characterized there almost as a fairy tale. Now, it's another perfect example of this coming towards you of the astral and the coming towards you of the etheric, the future and the past, because that's the way I see Scythionus. And recently there have been a few other movies done by people who are beginning to awaken to the fact that many of the cultural influences that we know about have been wrongly attributed to being grassroots, that they came out of the place that they were as their own creations. But that's not true. Scythianus influenced every culture that he and the Scythians, the true Aryans, not the negative version of that, but the true fifth migration off of Atlantis, and they influenced all these people in amazing ways. But Scythianus was so flexible and understood the mysteries of the human body so thoroughly that he could give the proper songs, because most of these things were sung, or the proper poetry in hexameter, which was the perfect rhythm between breath and heartbeat. And when you go to these things like the Kalevala, it was literally, well, I'll describe it. Just like the Brothers Grimm and Snorri Sturluson with the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda went around and talked to the people who had been singing these songs and saying these verses and these epic poems since time immemorial. And so when they went to Finland, they would go into the what we would call a bar, and there would be two men sitting on a teeter-totter. And they would be going up and down and up and down. And one would say part of the verse, and then the other would say the other part of the verse until the pseudo-hexameter was complete. And so these things were put into the rhythmic memory, the etheric memory, the etheric body, the life body of people so deeply that they were transmitted over tens of thousands, well, 10,500 years or so, because the Kalevala and the Norse mythology were some of the last things to be written down as the cultural heritage, not of that particular area, but that had been influenced by Scythianus. So it's this meeting of the future, because Scythianus has already given us great mysteries for the future. The consciousness soul era goes from 1415 AD for 2,160 years. So during that time, you can study the Kalevala, and it will be appropriate as a fairy tale, as a spiritual wisdom put into a nutshell for each of us to be able to develop our soul into wedding our spirit. Now, I'd like to read something from a lecture that you recommended for today, and it's very much in alignment with what has been said here. And it's From the Wisdom of Man, of the Soul, and of the Spirit by Rudolf Steiner, Part 2, The Wisdom of the Soul, Lecture 4, Consciousness and the Soul Life, or what he calls Psychosophia, which is most interesting, that it's basically a psychology of wisdom. And you had recommended this, and I found a quote that I thought was so appropriate for today's talk. And it goes like this, quote, "The current of desire, love, and hate comes to meet you out of the future and meets the current of visualizations flowing out of the past into the future. At every moment, you are actually in the midst of this encounter of the two streams. And considering that the present moment of your soul life consists of such a meeting, you will readily understand that these two currents overlap in your soul. This overlapping is consciousness. Thus, we will designate the current of visualizations flowing from the past into the future, the etheric body of the soul, and the other, the current of desires running from the future into the past, the astral body of the soul. Consciousness is the meeting of the astral and etheric bodies, and they meet in this chalice or in this holy grail of the heart. Now, there was one other thing that Rudolf Steiner said, a fairy tale that would also last for the entire fifth epoch that we are in, and is, again, not only great wisdom to teach us, but it's an antidote to the negative forces of the consciousness soul development era. And that is Goethe's Green Snake and Beautiful Lily. Recently, I did a talk on this as well as an article. And also, if you're interested in Scythianus further, on aimfortruth.org, you can do a search for Scythianus, and you will find an article, multiple articles, as well as one describing who he was as a great master, as well as the cultural impulses of the Scithians. But in The Green Snake and Beautiful Lily by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, we have this beautiful phrase that is being spoken to. It's actually a question and answer between the green snake, who is the symbol and the representative of the Christ consciousness in each of us, asking one of the four kings. There's a gold king, silver king, bronze king, and mixed, that mixes all those metals together. And those are the ages that we're referring to here. So the conversation goes something like this. The king asks the snake, "From whence come ye?" which is also the first phrase in Freemasonic rituals. You can read this in any book out there on the internet. So the gold king says to the green snake, "From whence come ye?" And the snake answers, "From the chasms where the gold dwells." And the gold king then says, "What is grander than gold?" And the green snake answers, "Light." The gold king asks again, "What is more refreshing than light?" And the green snake answers, "Conversation," or speech. Well, gold is thinking. Light is feeling in this particular analogy. And conversation is that activity, the archai. So it isn't good enough just to have good thoughts. And it isn't good enough to find the wisdom in those good thoughts. it must then be communicated to others so that out of that arises human impulses of communion, of communication, of conversation. And that's what we try to do in these talks, is to have a conversation about what each of us have experienced and are searching for the gold of the wisdom, the gold of all the ancient traditions, and then making it apropos for today's world, turning it into light, finding that light in wisdom, and then being able to have a conversation with another so that between the conversation, something comes to a light, just as the meditation at the opening of this podcast indicated, in this chalice created by the strength and the courage. In that conversation, a drop of intuition can come so that that which is coming to us out of the astral from the future, that which is coming to us out of the etheric, the past, comes into the present moment so that it alights as something that is appropriate, something that is vital for our own time. And of course, the zeitgeist, the spirit of our times, according to Rudolf Steiner and many others, Trithemius of Sponheim and Dionysius the Areopagite, that being that is the zeitgeist of our time is an archangel who has risen to the realm of an archai, the realm of time spirit, and is leading us in the type of thinking that becomes warmed up by the heart and becomes activated by intuition. And that being, of course, is the archangel or the archai, Michael, the archangel Michael. And so all of this ties together. And when you realize that it's all within the human being, then that is the true secret. There are 4 secrets in the green snake and the beautiful lily. And the 4th secret, the most important one, is the time is at hand.
Yes. You could also say the time is now. And you could wake up every morning and say, what time is it? And you would have to agree, it's now. And so, what have you done today? It's very clear in any genuine tradition that your relationship to the divine spiritual world has to do with what you do. It's not what your theoretical model was. It's not a list of rules that you have committed to memory. You could do that easy enough and then not follow the wisdom of that guidance to where it becomes love through your actions. So it has to do with, as Rudolf Steiner said, the higher triad is love, wisdom that leads to action born out of conscience. And so that's that still small voice that's mentioned by St. John in the Gospel. And so it's being able to have your individual nature learn to become quiescent in your astral body and be able to find that point of stillness so that you can hear that still small voice. My personal path of clearing out the bramble bushes is, of course, the Lord's Prayer, the only prayer given by our Lord. And in it, Rudolf Steiner indicates that it contains all of this in a seed form. And it's nice because even if you don't understand it, it doesn't matter. It has a transformative effect on you to live with that prayer thoughtfully and just to say it. And that it's even more powerful if you can recite it in the original language of Aramaic, or even the Latin version, he said, is more potent in its transformative effect. But in meditating on that content and trying to decode the levels of depth that are contained within it, or other meditative tools that one can use, because in coming to understand that the universe is consciousness and it's subjected to the illusory realm of space and time, and that when you get into understanding your relationship to the divine spiritual beings, that Riddlesteiner says that your thinking becomes a manifestation of the realm of the angels, and your feeling becomes a manifestation of the realm of the archangels, and that your actual will impulses can become a manifestation of the realm of the archai, the source of the way in which world destiny unfolds, and that you become a willing supplicant to the wishes of the Father that manifests through the Son by the agency of the Holy Spirit. And so it's always developing through this Trinitarian viewpoint that one can approach this mystery. But it's important to recognize, though, and Riddlesteiner says that when you enter into the astral world, that things are in reverse order. And he gave what was called a rukshao, which is a meditation whereby at the end of the day, you go through the whole day backwards and contemplate it. And if you develop that as a practice over time, eventually that will help you to bring yourself into a relationship to the divine spiritual world and your relationship to your holy guardian angel, which is working in unity as a choir of angels with the whole realm of the angelic hierarchy. And it's a marvelous image to work with. But what that might mean is that you develop moral imagination. And in understanding what moral imagination is, you could, I think, glean that it has to do with trying to think good thoughts that are in line with the intentions of the divine spiritual powers under the agency of Christ. And that when you get into moral imagination and then coming to an understanding of imagination and then moral inspiration, to be able to develop that warmth of speech, and then moral intuition, to be able to be a servant of Christ. And that Christ, what did he do? How did he spend his days? He went around healing people and chasing demons out of people. I don't know too many people that's how they spend their day. But it's a very real destiny, and it tends to get forgotten that's what he was. He administered to the people. And what you do to the least of them, you do unto me.
Yes, you mentioned this Trinitarian or threefold nature. In the Green Snake and Beautiful Lily, it's called wisdom, beauty, and strength. The Greeks called it truth, beauty, and goodness. And if you can just focus on that, truth, beauty, and goodness, and you are in your life attempting to glean the truth from knowledge, so that through experience you turn knowledge into wisdom, like the Gold King, or if you are seeking beauty in your heart, if you're trying to bring artistry of every type, even the artistry of love is a beautiful thing. And so as you're making the world a more beautiful place, you're making yourself a more beautiful person, and you're helping to create beautiful circumstances, then that is really calling down archangels to participate. And then when you're doing, you have the strength to do the good, like in the fairy tale, Steiner said that it was basically the development of necessity into freedom. Now, Fichte and others say that the only freedom is duty, or something to that effect. They point out that duty is what drives freedom. And that's when you can really feel good that you are doing your duty, whether it's for yourself, your family, the state, whoever. But it is moving beyond necessity. A duty is a necessity if you wish to be a good citizen. But when you move into freedom, it is only through love that you'll find true freedom. And for instance, if you love your family, that's not freedom. But if you love your enemy, that's freedom. And where are you going to find the strength to do that? It's not even your strength. You're calling on the beings of the spirits of time, or the um, archai, as they're called, angels, archangels, and archai. You're calling on the archai to indwell in you and bring that wisdom and that beauty into action to help others. So it's a very profound thing to understand that we are a threefold being, and it seems as if it's rather trite. And some people give Rudolf Steiner the credit for creating a threefold psychology, but he also created a threefold understanding of the physical, etheric, and astral nature of the human body, and then the sentient soul, intellectual soul, consciousness soul of the soul, that's threefold. And then there's the threefold nature of the spirit self, life spirit, spirit man, or as John has just mentioned, manas, buddhi, and atman. Well, if you take all 9 of those represent, and in a very real way, through direct correspondences and collaboration, the 9 hierarchical beings that are talked about in Christianity, specifically in Dionysius the Areopagite and the Divine Names, his work, which is attributed to him. They said that was also the Holy Grail. If you could understand the 9 hierarchy, then you could understand the Holy Grail, the human heart. But of course, in Christianity, above the 9 hierarchy is the Holy Trinity. And that Holy Trinity is this Trinity that John made reference to, and I'm making reference to, the thinking, feeling, and willing in all of its forms: truth, beauty, and goodness, wisdom, beauty, and strength, imagination, inspiration, intuition. This threefold nature is also found in the 9 hierarchy, in the 3 ranks with 3 hierarchy in each. The angels, archangels, and archai are the lower part of those 9. The exousiai, dynamis, and Kyriotutes are the second, and the cherubim, thrones, cherubim, and seraphim are the third highest set of 3. But we are all of those. We are all of those combined, and what keeps it cohesive and coherent is the fact that we have a Trinity in ourselves. And that's why we're talking about this and can talk about this ad infinitum. There is no end to making the connections between human and cosmic intelligence, wisdom, consciousness, however you wish to describe it. This is something that is content for meditation for your entire life. And many times you can give a glib answer to almost any anthroposophic question. You can ask the question, and then the first thing you can say is, well, the answer is threefold. It's always going to be threefold. It's always going to have 3 parts to it. So I thought that I would present something from a lecture cycle. It's one of the multiple lecture cycles on what Rudolf Steiner called the 5th gospel. And John had recommended this. And in here I had found basically the tripartitioning of this lower ranks of the hierarchy, the angels, archangels, and archai. And I found it very helpful. Each of them has a paragraph, and I thought that I might just read one paragraph, and we could address this concept of what it means to meet your angel, to meet your guardian angel, and for the fact that, as Tyler pointed out to me today, as we were having a chat before this, and I told her what we'd be talking about, she said, well, paraphrasing her, essentially, people know they're human, but they don't know what they're supposed to become. They don't know what the goal is. They don't have their eye on the ring, the golden ring. They simply are subsisting. And if things go poorly, they follow the 7 deadly sins into the realm of hell. And if they follow the 7 heavenly virtues, they go into heaven. And that's it. Some people, though they shouldn't, if they have a clear, active mind that can have consequential thinking, it's hard not to accept the idea of repeated human incarnations. And so what happens over the whole list of many, many, many incarnations that an individual has? Hopefully, they are evolving out of the sentient soul of almost animalistic desires and perceptions and the lower nature, as we would call it, into being a higher being, a higher human being that goes into the realm of the angels. Now, this doesn't happen overnight. And one would say that if you, in fact, reached enlightenment, what you're really reaching is your next stage of evolution called being an angel, an angeloi. Well, here's a little bit of a description for that so that you can realize that in your thinking, the beautiful thing about thinking is it's not yours if it's higher thinking. You're sharing it with the angels. The angels actually come and alight in you when you're having higher thoughts called imagination. And I always make the distinction that is not fantasy, that is not non-consequential fantasy. It is imagination that sees behind the working of the world the angelic beings who have fallen into existence and suffered themselves for a time to manifest in space through our thinking. And the beautiful thing about thinking, when it's a higher form of thinking, no single thought stands alone. They are all in relationship to other thoughts. And so if you have a higher thought, in general, it's going to lead you to other higher thoughts because they are connected. The angels don't have the privacy that we have to stand alone and choose love out of freedom instead of being part of an organism that is connected, that supports things in the spiritual world, supports the beings in the spiritual world that are all work together for a common good. So when we describe here, when Rudolf Steiner describes here what the realm of the action of the angels is, that is what we're trying to point out here as we're talking about human and cosmic wisdom. So this is from the Fifth Gospel, Part 2, Lecture 2, December 18th, 1913 in Cologne. And it's from GA 148 for those of you who are jotting that down. Also, when we post this, when Tyler posts this, she'll probably put these program notes in there so that you can have these quotes and you'll have the particular references so you can go see them in their context, because it's always good to have that. So this is what Rudolf Steiner says about angels, quote, "But whereas we may have one thought, all our thoughts are the angels' thoughts." Point of clarification, all of our higher thoughts. That's what he's speaking of. I'm going to read that again because it's actually utterly profound, especially if you haven't heard this before. And it's just this one sentence you could take into meditation for the rest of your life, and it could develop the language of the spirit for you to contact your own angel. Quote, "But whereas we may have one thought, all our thoughts are the angels' thoughts. The angels think our consciousness. We let the angels think our thoughts. We must realize that we are not conducting our thoughts, but that the beings of the next hierarchy are conducting them. We must feel the interweaving, undulating consciousness of the angels. We then receive information about the continuous impulse of evolution, for example, about the truth of the Christ impulse, how it continues to be active now. The angels can think this impulse. We humans can also think and describe it if we devote our thoughts to the angels so they think in us." I want to make a clear distinction that your normal daily thoughts based upon sense perception of the physical world are not what he's referring to here as thoughts. What we're referring to here is what has a bit of an eternal nature to it, thoughts that will go on living as archetypes. We would often call them abstract because when you see a picture of an angel with wings, I saw a really cheesy thing that was posted on the internet the other day, and here are these angels flapping around in their dresses, with no feet, and they're always white, and they always have a golden halo around their head. And that is not what an angel is. When you are thinking about thinking, and you can actually start to experience and grasp what it is that gives you the capacity for thinking, and that's what he said here. The angels conduct your thoughts. They don't give you your thoughts. You rise up to them. They don't come down and penetrate your earthbound thinking. But when you rise up into a realm that is more eternal, that is more archetypal, the realm of the archetypes, as referred to by the Greeks, that is when you can start to encounter the capacities that you have to be angelic. That's when you can start to begin to understand what we call in the Gospel of Sophia, my wife and I, Tyla, called the language of the Spirit, which has specific, you can have a variety of specific alphabets, just like there's many languages with many alphabets. But once you get your language and you start to understand each of those alphabetic characters, you can start to put them together so that they create a language as speech, conversation, communion. And as that is happening, you are bringing your personal higher thinking into the realm of the angels, and it is nourishment for them. And once that gets across the threshold, whether through conscious meditation, prayer, spiritual reflection, or whether in your dreams, or even through a vision or other such things, when you can actually reach across that threshold into the spiritual realm with your thinking, with imagination, and you contact an angel, you're also going to then be fed just as you are feeding them. It is a reciprocal feeding. It is a reciprocal nourishment, and it is the most amazing thing. And if you wonder what this is like, then you probably haven't had the experience. Because if you have the experience, you will know you've had that experience, because that thought is not going to leave you. Those true higher thoughts that are in the language of the spirit of angels stay with you for the rest of your life, if not the rest of all of your incarnations. And so contact with these archetypal beings, that is what we're trying to strive for as a human. And if you don't have that as a goal, it's hard to attain it. So we must rarefy, we must clarify exactly what it is that we're trying to do so that our eye is on the goal, so that we can then take our effort and offer it into the spiritual world to nourish them. And they're anxiously awaiting for anyone to do this. And then they will turn around through a very specific process that we have defined in the Gospel of Sophia. And Rudolf Steiner, of course, defined it as the earthly and cosmic nutrition stream, which John and I have spoken about in previous conversations. That is what you're trying to do. And by the way, in a minute, when we go to Archangels and Archai, we'll find that it's not an easy process. It's a process where you really have to put a lot on the line, a great deal of effort. And then at that moment that you can truly relax and surrender into these higher thoughts that you have, then the cosmic awakening, the spiritual language will sound in you, and you will be nourished, and you will know that you've had that experience.
Yes, that concourse with angels. The way it's encoded in the Northern Mysteries, it said that Sigga or Siegfried, that he slew the dragon, and it was the anointment of the dragon's blood that Siegfried experienced that gave him the capacity to speak the language of the birds. And so that it's that archetypal relationship that it's called the voice of nature, or the green language, the lang vert. It's referenced to now chemical literature, and it's a very potent thing. And its scriptural context, of course, is the Holy Spirit. And for those that are challenged by our using, we tend to be universally human, so we could go into numerous language systems to describe what we're discussing. But within the Christian language, you have the Holy Spirit, the Logos, and the Father. So the mysteries of the Holy Spirit is the mystery of Sophia, yes? That's that wisdom mystery. That's that language of the birds, to where you can actually have a profound relationship to the world around you, because you are having a mirroring of its content within your realm of thinking. And of course, the realm of thinking on the earthly realm is related to the 12 pairs of cranial nerves that are situated in the brain. And these 12 pairs of cranial nerves are what cause you to have this death process in your thinking. But to be able to overcome that death process by thinking about thinking, to where you can enter into the realm of moral imagination in its first phase and begin to come into a relationship of this realm of the angels and of the Holy Spirit. That's the beginning of the journey, and that's meant to be the fruit of this fifth post-Atlantean period. That's the development of the fifth principle. The fifth principle is the principle of manas. The fourth principle is the principle of the ego, and not ego as in egotism in the Freudian sense, but ego as in you're the only person that can say I and mean you. And so that's the ego. That's your entelechy. That's the core of your being. And to the extent that you could take this being and start to work into overcoming the challenges of the astral, of the etheric, and the physical, that's how you become eternal. That's the only extent to which you participate in the eternal is by taking your individual I am, that's referenced in the Old Testament and that was manifested through our Lord Jesus Christ, and so that it's revealed to all of the apostles and followers of Jesus, to where they were touched by the Holy Spirit and said that they could speak language and be understood by anybody in any tongue, the tongues of speech, right? So this is a universal tradition. This is not exclusively within one tradition or another. In ancient India, they would talk about Vat, and the Vach was the sacred speech, and that the sacred speech was this goddess principle, much like in the Greek tradition. That's the goddess Sophia. That's that wisdom. This is the Sophia principle, and so you have like the great Gnostic book, the Pistis Sophia. What does that mean? Pistis is faith, and Sophia means wisdom. So that we have this great tapestry of human culture that we can draw upon to be supportive of developing this moral imagination, moral inspiration, and moral intuition, so that it could serve as an offering to the Godhead that we lived courageously as a worthy human being, and that we're meant to become the spirits of freedom and love. That's our mission. And by becoming spirits of freedom and love, then we are able to ascend, and as St. Paul says, ye shall be as the angels.
That is so true. And what you were just saying, the language of the birds, I remember the first time you introduced myself and others to that concept, we thought, what's he talking about? But the language of the birds is because, just like Siegfried, when the blood, the dragon opened him up, he could understand the speech of nature. Well, also, when I'm referring to thinking, another way to look at it is warmed up thinking, it's sometimes called. Thinking that has been added the warmth of the heart, and this then becomes imagination. But generally, as our old teacher Hans Gabriel used to tell us, to start the path of spiritual development, you have to start in the head. You have to have clear thinking. You have to use your powers of observation in the physical world to work so hard that it's like a muscle, and then when you relax, it opens like a vessel and something can flow in. And this is what we'd see in the Mithraic mysteries, the mysteries of Siegfried, which of course were inspired by Scithianus. Now, when we talk about the archangels, of course, we all know that there are 7 archangels in anthroposophy that Rudolf Steiner refers to. And of course, the archangel Michael is the archangel of the sun. But now Michael has risen up when their time comes to become a time spirit for a certain period of time with the Archangel Michael. It's from 1875, 1879 on into our age. The inspiration is there, but Michael is not one who comes and just simply gives it to you. You must rise up to cosmic wisdom before you're going to receive that. So it's the effort that happens. It's the effort of expressing love out of freedom from your heart that is going to get you to some of these realms, and that's what changes higher thinking, lower thinking, into higher thinking. So, quoting again from the fifth gospel, the same reference as before, I'll read something about the archangels, and at the end of this, we'll be referring to the archai, and that comes to some very dicey topics that people might be a bit shocked to hear. But this is what Rudolf Steiner says about the archangels. Quote, by means of further meditative practice, we are able not only to be thought by the angels, but to be experienced by the archangels. Those things related to the epochs of Earth's evolution, the ancient Indian epoch, the ancient Persian epoch, and so forth, are thought by the archangels. You must then come to the point where you know that you are delivering your life to the life of the archangels. And continuing with practice, we arrive at the feeling that we are brought to various regions of the world by the archangels and thus learn about those regions. To correctly describe the ancient Indian or ancient Egyptian cultures, one must understand the meaning of, and then in quotes, your soul has been brought to this or that time by the archangels, end of quote. It is as though your life body fluids knew that they support the life process and are carried through the organism of the blood. Thus, the seer knows that he is conducted through the life process of the world by the archangels. There's a lot of hidden things that are in this. For instance, he refers to the blood, and he also refers to the fact that if you want to understand a certain cultural epic or a cultural nation, it is really the folk soul that you're going to have to contact. And the archangel is often called the folk soul. So, in general, most nations that have a specific language, it has its own archangel, its own folk soul. So, when you wish to, as he was making reference here, because this is a lecture on the fifth gospel, if you want to go back and understand Christ in those ancient times, you would be carried back there by the archangels acting in you. They literally come in you and become part of your process, your experience, your physical nature, and they can take you there, and then you can begin to experience them through this higher force of inspiration. Now, I often refer to this, that when you are inspired in the spiritual world, it may only be 1 second of inspiration, but if it's a true spiritual inspiration, it can fire your will, it can fire your heart, your feelings of love developed out of freedom for the rest of your life. So contact with an archangel is just as profound as contact with an angel. And you might think, well, but wait a second, I'm not an archangel in this incarnation. Maybe I can rise up to higher thinking, imagination, but certainly I'm not going to rise up to the realm of the archangels. But that's not true. We do in those moments of visions of inspiration in the physical world, of high states of meditation, but also in our dreams, we can be contacted with the language of the spirit that we develop through our thinking, higher thinking, and we reach a common body called the life spirit when we go into that realm, and that is common for everyone, that they can tap into and understand, as John just pointed out, the Pentecostal gift of understanding all languages at once. In other words, understanding the archetypal language, or what John has referred to as the language of the birds.
Yes, that sacred speech. And mind you, the logos is that throat chakra. That's that mystery of the 16-petaled lotus that, according to the tradition, was conquered by the Buddha. And now the sphere of Mars is that realm of the realm of speech. And that Buddha has conquered that realm. So Mars is also that warfare. That's the blood of the dragon, right? That red blood. It's because of our ability to take up iron into the earth that we were able to come into a relationship with the realm of warmth, to be able to have an ego in the first place. Had we not had that homeopathic input of iron from our relationship to the actual, what's now the planet Mars, we would have not been able to develop that capacity to be able to receive the Christ and to be able to manifest that logoic nature that's in the archangelic realm of speech. And so in light of all this, we went a little longer than usual because we're having so much fun here. But I want to keep you in mind that somebody keeps calling me. And I want to keep it in the forefront of your mind that Dr. Gabriel has some wonderful books. And these books are available. You can get them on Amazon. There's the Eternal Curriculum for Wisdom Children, Intuitive Learning, and the Etheric Body. And his other primary text is Eternal Curriculum, Wisdom Children, Intuitive, well, that's the link, excuse me, that's for the book I just mentioned. The second book is The Eternal Ethers, A Theory of Everything. And so you can experience the wisdom of Douglas Gabriel through those works, The Eternal Ethers, A Theory of Everything, and Eternal Curriculum for Wisdom Children. And you can get them on Amazon. You can get free PDFs of them, or you can buy them in a book form, but they're an unending source of inspiration. As for myself, I have two humble efforts here. I have my first book, The Arcana of the Grail Angel, The Spiritual Science of the Holy Blood and of the Holy Grail, a study developed out of the work of Rudolf Steiner, the underground streams of esoteric Christianity, which flowed from the Brotherhood of the Holy Grail to the Order of the Knights Templar and the True Rosicrucian Order. And it has a foreword by Douglas Gabriel, and it's loaded with diagrams. It's some 640 heavy referenced pages with an extensive bibliography. And the sequel to that is the Arcana of Light on the Path. This is more of a meditative tool, and it has all of the diagrams that are included in the first volume, plus it has a complete extension into many other diagrams, so that if you're studying spiritual science, these are invaluable tools. They're based upon diagrams that crossed my desk many years ago by Ehrenfurt Pfeiffer, the direct student of Rudolf Steiner. And after many years of studying my notes from those diagrams, I was able to carry that approach further in the spirit of Enriquez Montanus. But that being said, my books are available on eBay. You can order them from me directly through eBay, or if you're outside the country, then you could go and contact me through my academia website, and that's an easy way to go. That's jbarnwell.academia.edu/research, and you can get a free PDF of the foreword by William Bento to Arcana of Light on the Path. And of course, if you want to buy Douglas or I a cup of coffee, you can go to paypal.me/JohnBarnwell888 and just indicate that you want Douglas to have some coffee too, and I'd be more than happy to buy him some. And don't forget to go to his website that he shares with his wonderful, totally industrious wife, Tyla, American Intelligence Media, and numerous other platforms. But if you go to American Intelligence Media, you'll be able to locate all those, and also of the sister organization, Americans for Innovation. And there I wanted to get all that. That's a lot to get in. And it's not always easy for me to remember. I can click like, and also on YouTube, you want to subscribe to my channel. That's very helpful to us.
Thank you for saying all that, John, because yes, some of this is so deep that you're going to need further elaboration on it to really come to what it is that we're talking about. I'd like to read the third quote here from the fifth gospel about Archy, because it's certainly one of the more interesting quotes that you can get in terms of spiritual development. Quote, "It is just as true that we humans have the purpose of serving the Archy as food. While we walk around here on Earth, we are at the same time beings who are continually consumed, eaten by the Archy. Man is for the Archy what a grain of wheat is for you as a physical human being. Don't only know this theoretically, but live in respect to the Archy as a grain of wheat would live were it to be ground to porridge by our teeth and pass through our palates and stomach with the awareness, I am human food. Therefore also know, I am the Archy's food. I am digested by the Archy. That is their life, which I live in them. To vividly know this means to enter the consciousness of the spirits of personality, the Archy, just as what it means to enter the consciousness of the archangels when one knows our soul is brought to this or that epoch by the archangel, and what it means to enter the consciousness of the angels when we know my thoughts are thoughts by the angels. If we wish to enter the higher worlds, the conditions of experience must be different. It is necessary to be knowingly consumed by the spirits of personality if concrete facts, such as the life of Jesus of Nazareth in human evolution, are to be investigated. This means that higher research is not possible without inner pain and suffering. But where individual experiences of the soul are concerned, they can only be investigated if the soul gives meaning to the words, the soul delivers itself as food to the Archy, the spirits of personality. So the question is, do you want to make the spiritual world starve to death, or would you like to feed them? You feed them by necessity, becoming freedom through love. You feed them by developing higher thinking, feeling, and willing. And next time when we have a conversation, we're going to talk about these stages of imagination, inspiration, and intuition. They can only be attained through great effort and in what Aristotle, in the way that Aristotle refers to suffering. It's a beingness that as you rise up into higher beingness to meet beings, you have to really put forth an effort that is not easy to do. So what we're talking about isn't some silly path of the ascended masters. It isn't about the 7 rays and how you can contact master beings who are going to come and touch you and you're going to be enlightened. No, it is about serious work, serious effort. And when you take upon yourself the responsibility to know that everything that you do can be an intuition and can be acted out of intuition, and intuition by its own definition means that it is true, it is full of wisdom, it is full of beauty, it is full of truth and strength and courage, and it is the action of love through us, not the feeling of like and dislike, but the action of love. And love, in all cases, has long suffering. It has to stand underneath. It has to hold up. It has to have compassion before it can become true love. It is not an easy path. And what we're describing here aren't just a bunch of philosophical words. These are deeds of the spirit.
Absolutely. It gives a whole new level of meaning to the words of our Lord at the Last Supper when he said, "Do this in memory of me." He's telling you to sacrifice on the altar, sacrifice yourself on the altar of God. And so when you get into understanding the sacrifice of the sheath nature, it goes back to that meditation that Rudolf Steiner gave. And I'll just share this with you, and then we can thank Dr. Gabriel for sharing his valuable time with us. But Rudolf Steiner talked about imagining before you is Moses, and there's the golden calf, and that Moses takes the golden calf and he burns it to ash, and then he takes the ash and pours it in the water, and then you drink that water. And that's we have to be able to get past all of that which is not of the eternal, that there's that which is merely transitory, that's just here to distract us from our eternal nature. And Rudolf Steiner makes this salient point regarding the mystery of the destroying of the golden calf. He said, had Moses not done that, that the mystery of Golgotha could have never taken place. Thank you, Douglas.
Thank you, John.